One was all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a board certified health coach, no other than Mr. Jonathan McLernon.
Yeah, that's me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Jonathan. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Red Deer, Alberta. So for the Canadian listeners, you might know where that is. For the Americans, I'm kind of north of Montana. How about that? Board certified
Awesome.
health coach. But I have a lot of interests in life. Health coaching is one of my great passions, but I also write about my faith. I write about the absurdity of being a parent. Sometimes I write about geopolitics as well because I think a central theme in my life is this journey of like kind of wrestling with the different challenges we face in life, and it's born of like the different experiences that I've been through. So I've been through all kinds of trauma, had a crazy kind of a crazy story, and that got me to where I was. And I say I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't gone through what I went through. So
Mr. Jonathan McLernon, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, what book do you want to recommend to our listeners right now?
well, if I was to pick one book that I think probably aligns pretty closely um, with my stuff, it would be The Power of Story. I am working on a book myself, but
Good.
yeah, but I would say The Power of Story by Jim Lohr. And it's what's interesting about it is how to put it. We we act out the story that we have in our head. So we have every one of us has a picture in our head of how we see ourselves to be, who we see ourselves to be, and how we see ourselves interacting with the world. Call it our story. Our brain likes to keep us feeling pretty secure. And so it's going to nudge us to move in a direction and act and behave in a way that's consistent with a story that's in our head. That can be a great thing, but it can also be a real problem because what if your story says I'm a hopeless failure, I'm a loser, um, I can't do anything good in my life, I'm always going to struggle, and so on and so forth, right? So if we, yeah, if we don't know about the story, it's hard to change it. So when you think about how the flow of a story, the first part of it is really becoming aware of what is the story in my head that I'm currently being steered by, in a sense, because we can't change what we're not aware of. Um, and then we figure out, okay, well, what's the story that I'd like to have, and from there we go, well, how do I rewrite that story? How do I change the story? Because our brain would like to keep that story consistent, because if it keeps it consistent, it can keep us safe and secure, right? So it
Sure.
wants to hold that story steady. So you can't come in there like an elephant or a bull in a china shop or something like that and just start tearing things down. Well, trauma can do that, but most people probably rather not go through that part of it. So we kind of have to go through it in a little bit more subtle way than just sort of smashing things down and starting anew. Because this is often why something like self-sabotage occurs, is when we try to change our story more rapidly than our brain can keep up with, and our brain's going to undermine our efforts to bring us back to what is familiar and what feels secure. And so it's really, really important. This look,
Totally important.
I was going to say, this book looks like a slightly different one than what I was referencing, but it
But
is
this is not this Harold Johnson, no? This is not the one.
no, by Jim Lohr. I
Jim
think it's how you say
Lur,
it.
sorry.
There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Jim Lur. Okay.
yeah. And it's just really like the
The cover story, yes.
yeah.
That's the
You got
one.
it. Yeah. A lot of us are stuck in like unconscious narratives. How would I put it?
Yes.
It's like we don't really think about the story because it's second nature to us. And so, unless you stop and make yourself aware of the patterns of behavior that you're acting out, like you might not even realize you're doing it.
Hmm.
One of the ways that I think that I like to meet people is really, really important is with what I call my compassionate curiosity. So, the reason I use this word compassion is compassion allows us to look at our patterns of behavior without the lens of judgment. So let's say you'd like to create change in your life, but if you start from a place of like I'm a terrible person, I'm a hopeless loser, I do all these stupid things, I don't know why I do these things and so on. Well, maybe I take one step back and say, if we don't have a better explanation for why we do what we do, we're probably going to create a false narrative of what a terrible person we are. And so sometimes one of the first things I'm going to do is help people see why they're doing what they're doing in a different light. That, hey, let's remove this lens of judgment that says you're a terrible person. Let's look at these patterns of behavior in a different way. Maybe these patterns of behavior are meeting a need. Maybe these patterns of behavior are solving a problem, even if the long-term effects of it are not great. If we can understand our patterns of behavior in that way, it makes it a little bit more comfortable to bring our unhelpful patterns of behavior into our conscious awareness if we know we're not going to be judged. That's where we have the freedom to start creating some kind of transformation in our life.
Totally agree, Coach John. So, how's your understanding the role storytelling plays in business and life change after reading the book?
Yeah. Well, I think about how, like, my story about who I am as a professional. And, I come from a small town in BC, so I'm a small town Canadian guy. And, uh, maybe there's something that comes with the sort of a small town mentality that I'm not really a big deal. I'm not really that special. There's lots of people better
Yes.
than me, lots of people doing other things than me. As I started to get more and more into my coaching work, I started to realize that maybe I am onto something kind of special and unique. And it doesn't mean that I elevate myself in status above other people. I don't feel that I'm any better than another person, but I started to uncover the things that I'm good at and then go, oh, well, if I have these skills, if I have these gifts, if I have these abilities, why wouldn't I want to share them and use them? And so I had to kind of start to rewrite my own story from I'm never going to be good enough. People are never going to believe me. People are never going to trust me. Like all of these stories and patterns that were undermining my efforts, to realizing that being confident and knowing what I do well does not make me arrogant. It's when I think that my abilities make me better or elevate me in status above another human being. So as long as I'm aware of what I do well, I can actually really use that to serve and help other people. But if I start to use it as, if I come from a place of insecurity, I might try to elevate myself above other people with the stories I tell myself. So, my business is very relational, or my work really, my profession is very relational, and there's a lot of trust involved with it. And people are coming oftentimes in some kind of vulnerable state because a part of my work in some context is addictions counseling. So helping people with various substances from nicotine to cannabis to alcohol to, digital addiction, food addiction, gambling addiction, that kind of stuff, in addition to the health coaching that I do. So there's a couple of different streams of the work that I do. But in any case, anyone who wants to change their life is coming into a place of vulnerability. I'm going to tell you about my weaknesses, my struggles, my failures, the things I'm doing wrong. And it's so important that I can actually meet them with confidence, with a what do I say, an energy that makes them feel like they're like in a space of being trusted. So the stories that I was telling myself, I had to change those stories to say, I'm actually good at what I do. I'm operating from a place of integrity. I'm wanting to serve other people with the gifts that I have, and that allows me to show up differently in terms of how I work with people.
So, Coach John, what specific insights did you gain about the stories you've been telling yourself?
Well, it's sometimes it's uncomfortable to become aware of this. Like, let's say I do this work as a professional, and sometimes imposter syndrome creeps in because I'm still a human being with struggles, right?
True.
And the funny thing is, like, it's my struggles that make it like that I can really connect with other people. The fact that I can enter into their lived experience, because I too have struggles, but for a long time, I allowed imposter syndrome and the stories I was telling myself to undermine my efforts to work and to help other people. And they're really, and here's another thing. Probably for a lot of my life, I would have dismissed this under the category of like woo or like pseudoscience or things like that. But the more I started to study this and I started to study applied neuroscience, I worked with a neuroscience-based tech startup company. I mean, you start to look into the science behind this. This is very real. The fact that this, like, let me put it this way: there's never been something created in the real world that wasn't first a picture in someone's mind. You know,
True.
let's think about, we're going to build a structure. First of all, it starts with an idea. Then that idea is translated maybe into some blueprints or some architectural drawings. Before you don't just start slapping stuff together and hope that it's going to take shape while you're building it. We could kind of think about our story in the same way. Let's say you have this life that you want to create. You want to be an architect of your own life and your own experience and start to live your life in a different way. It has to start with a picture in your mind of what is possible for you. And this actually ties into one thing I'd like to share. I say one of my coaching superpowers is I joke that it's called X-ray vision. Um,
I like
what do I
that.
mean? And I don't mean I'm clairvoyant, and I don't mean that I'm psychic, but I mean I'm pretty good at reading people, and I can't quite put my finger on how it all works. There's just something about it. Maybe it's a bit of ADHD and rapid pattern recognition. I've got a really good engineering brain, stuff like that. But I can kind of read people, and what that allows me to do is see what's possible for them. So going back to this idea of story, many of us are our own story encumbers or lessens our ability to see what is our potential. A lot of our stories are undermining our efforts to grow into our best self because our brain is trying to keep us in what is safe and familiar. Because to move into like this growth zone and to live on the edge of your potential is actually kind of scary a little bit, because you're like, I'm living on the edge of my competence and my ability. What happens if I fail? And so it's natural to want to go back to kind of your comfort zone. But so as a coach, I go, I over time as I work with someone, I start to unpack and share with them the potential that I see. Like, here's what's possible for you. And I often say to people, you can borrow my belief in you until you begin to believe in yourself. But I've worked with enough people that I'm not going to lie to you about what's possible for you. So, for example, if you're a 75-year-old who's had two knee replacements and two hip replacements, I'm probably not going to tell you a story about how you're going to take up bobsled racing in the Olympics. It has to be grounded in some semblance of reality. But even someone in that situation there, the story is not necessarily done yet. There's still room for growth and improvement in a certain capacity. It's just a matter of identifying what is possible and what is realistic.
Certainly, Coach John, totally agree 100%. So, did the book inspire you to rewrite any aspect of your personal or professional story?
Yeah, and I see you've got my Substack up on the screen, and it's kind of funny. If you scroll down somewhere in
Yes.
my somewhere in this, because I write about 4 different topics,
Okay.
from health topics to this is my faith journey to some controversial geopolitical opinions that I'm willing to be challenged on, by the way. But if we go to the next one here, when you scroll down, there's one about my journey starting at like 328 pounds. So it's going to be somewhere near the beginning. You're not near the bottom there.
Did the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. I found
Oh,
myself at 328 pounds.
where
We
is
almost
it?
got to it.
Welcome to my Substack. Oh, shoot.
Two up.
And next, two up.
I found myself at 328 pounds, staring in the mirror, looking at someone I didn't recognize. Now, to be fair,
Oh,
the Zen of airport flatulence is also a funny story, but you'll have to go back and just read my Substack to read about the Zen of airport flatulence. There's a real story behind
yes.
that too. So I am working on my own storytelling ability, and I'm writing my own book as well. But this tells me, or sorry, this shares some of my story and why I was struggling and what was like stopping me.
Hmm. Looking forward for the book itself, Coach John, and please do come back and let's do talk about it. And
Yeah.
which storytelling technique discussed in the book did you find most useful or transformative?
Um, I think understanding how to take people on a journey. We're wired for story as human beings. When you think about even before we had writing, and hey, maybe there's even still some rare societies on Earth where writing's not necessarily a common thing. I think literacy rates are very high now, but for most of human history, storytelling was a huge part of history, and so our brains, our memories, like stories, are sticky. They stay with us, and so telling stories and sharing real life human stories is very, very important for connecting with people, because what we do is we listen to a story and we look for elements of ourself in that story when we're looking for kind of hope and inspiration. So for example, if I'm going to tell my story about how I lost 100 pounds, someone else is going to read that and go, now if I'd have said, well, I hired a personal trainer, a personal chef, and I lived in a mansion for a year where all of my needs were taken care of, and because I won the lottery and so on, most people can't enter into that story. They're going to read that and be like, yeah, well, that's not possible for me, right? We think about like sort of Hollywood celebrities and the kind of figures that they're able to develop and so on because of the access they have. But on the other hand, if it's like, well, How to lose 100 pounds with great difficulty, actually. It was a genuine struggle because I had a lot of other factors in my life that I was dealing with, whether it was overcoming trauma, whether it was a young family, whether it was running a business, all kinds of things. And now the story becomes more relatable because it's like, oh, okay, you're a real human being with like real human struggles that I can relate to. So it's this aspect of, if we're going to tell a story, people need to be able to see elements of themselves in that story. So there's common human, how to put it, like common human threads or common human themes that come into a story. And if we can see an element of ourselves in a story, we can then find some inspiration and some basically like spark that says, I believe this is possible for me because this person here who had circumstances similar to my own was able to do this thing. I now can shift this belief of it's impossible to maybe there is some possibility here.
Certainly. So, Coach John, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to be empowered to
Yeah.
themselves?
I love to say that compassionate awareness is the foundation of transformational change. That
Oh, okay.
that is
Totally.
huge. So it is the ability to look at your struggles through the lens of compassion, removing the lens of judgment. Because now, when you're looking to understand and you're willing to say, hey, it's okay to struggle, it's okay to be human, now you can create transformation because you can't change what you're not aware of. But you won't bring into awareness the things that make you feel horrible about yourself. So compassion lets you look at your struggles through the lens of common shared humanity. I'm a human being who's struggling. There's compassionate awareness. That's the foundation of transformational change.
Totally agree. Yeah. So, Coach John, what would be your short-term and long-term goals as a coach?
Oh man, continue to refine my craft. So it's really important for me to keep growing and developing my skill set, and which is why I kind of branched into the world of addictions counseling as well. I'm I'm fascinated by it from like a human story perspective, from a neuroscience, a psychology, a physiology perspective, and I think I like the challenge of it. I like seeing what looks like a really, really difficult, challenging case and seeing if I can help to crack that case. Um, so I love like growing. I'm going to be writing a book. I'm developing some methodologies that I can't quite name yet publicly, but they're in the works, that might have the possibility to transform some aspects of coaching. Um, and creating something that can reach a lot of people. Isn't that what we all want? Is some kind of legacy where I was a
Yes.
part of a work that helped to positively influence other people's lives for the better. And not really for my own glory, because once I'm gone, it doesn't really matter in a sense, right? But there's something nice about legacy. This thought of like I did something to try to help make my little world a better place and those around me.
Totally agree. And good luck to your goals, coach. And thank you for your advice. So, is there an area in your life or career that you now see as a potential opportunity to rewrite your story?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So I've had a lot of setbacks in my life. Whether it's losing all my money in a failed business, whether it's being seriously injured in a motorcycle accident, whether it's going through violent trauma that left me, you know, but my story is not yet complete either. And so part of my work is, in fact, driven by my own growth and development, my own desire to better myself. And so I'm human, and as much as I intellectually know this stuff, and I can really, when I'm coaching people, I can really help them because I'm in my intellectual and emotionally intelligent brain. But in my own struggles, I'm in like my human emotional brain too. And so there's more room for growth in my life too. And actually, but now I don't see that as a detriment. That used to be a source of imposter syndrome, but now it's actually kind of exciting because I'm like, wow, this is great. I get to show people in this new stage of life, what is possible as well. And so it's like everything we're going through in life is an opportunity for a great story to emerge if we're willing to go through the hard part.
Yes, indeed. So before we wrap up our discussion today, Coach, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season. People, fifth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders. all over the world. So please do listen Food 101 wherever you listen your podcast. So, Coach John, if you could summarize the impact of this book on your perspective
Mm.
in one sentence, what would it be?
It literally changed everything I thought coaching was.
Interesting indeed. So, can you please invite our listeners to read this book, Mr. or Coach John?
Yeah, I would love for you to read The Power of Story by Jim Lohr. I think understanding this for yourself, and more than just reading the story, but like taking it and putting it into practice, because knowledge sitting on a shelf collecting dust doesn't help you. But if you read the story, one of the great things about it is there's actionable elements to this as well. So you take that information and you start to put it into practice in your life. And if you feel like you could use a little bit of help with that, might I say I could probably help you with that, you know?
Yes. Looking forward for your book, Coach John.
Mm.
And thank you so much for imparting your knowledge to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your profession as a coach?
Yeah, so if you want to connect with me, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can go to freedomnutritioncoach.com. That's where you're going to find a way to hop on a call with me. You can find me on Substack as well. I write about something called Wrestling with Truth, mildly concerned, mostly amused. That's my parenting story. So you can find me on Substack as well. Just Coach John McLernon. There you go. And so
Yes.
yeah, I would just love to connect and have a conversation, because I think conversations like this are where like real magic happens.
Yes, people will support Coach John McLernon or Jonathan McLernon, because if you support him, more and more coaching to come. And of course, we are looking forward for your first book, Mr. Jonathan. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Modicom people, see you soon.